He was 42 years old. The king of rock and roll died on his bathroom floor. It was August 16th, 1977. The official cause was a heart attack, but the story is so much bigger than that. He was bloated, overmedicated, and deeply unhappy. He was a prisoner in his own home. He was a myth who couldn't escape his own legend. The world was shocked. But should it have been? Did the people closest to him miss the signs? Or worse, did they ignore them? Elvis Presley had been telling everyone he was going to die for years. He said it in jokes. He said it in moments of despair. He said it with his actions. He seemed to know his story didn't have a happy ending. He was born a twin, but his brother, Jesse Garon, was stillborn. He lived his whole life feeling like half a person. His mother, Gladys, whom he adored, died at 46. He never got over it. He often said he wanted to be with her. Was his entire life a race to that finish line? Was his death an accident, or was it the final successful attempt at an escape he'd been planning for 2 decades? Here are the whispers, the warnings, and the outright declarations. The moments when the king predicted his own end. Number 16 wasn't all about his mother. It always came back to Gladys, and Elvis loved his mother with a fierce, almost suffocating intensity. They had their own private language. He called her Bobby. When he got rich, his first big purchase wasn't for himself. It was a pink Cadillac for her, even though she couldn't drive. Graceland was for her. His world revolved around her. And then, she was gone. Gladys Presley died on August 14th, 1958. She was only 46 years old. Her health had been ruined by diet pills and alcohol. Elvis was stationed in Germany with the U.S. Army. He was granted emergency leave to come home, but he was too late. He was inconsolable at her funeral. He sobbed, threw himself over her casket, and cried out, "Everything I have is gone." People who were there said it was the sound of a man whose soul had been ripped out. From that day forward, a shadow hung over him. He never fully recovered. In the years that followed, he told many people, including his girlfriend Linda Thompson and his friend Joe Esposito, that he didn't expect to live much longer than his mother. And he couldn't imagine a world where he was older than she ever was. He saw 46 as a finish line. This wasn't just a passing thought, it was a core belief. It was almost a goal. He would visit her grave at all hours, talking to her as if she were there. He filled Graceland with her portraits. He was preserving her memory, but he was also preserving his grief. This connection to Gladys became a roadmap for his own self-destruction. In Peter Guralnick's definitive biography, Careless Love, The Unmaking, of Elvis Presley, the author details how Elvis's life post-1958 was a slow, agonizing echo of his mother's decline. He started taking the same kinds of pills. His diet spiraled. He isolated himself. It was as if he was subconsciously mimicking her path to the grave, trying to get back to her. He didn't just miss her, he wanted to join her. He once told his stepbrother, David Stanley, "The best part of my life is over. I'm just gonna go be with my mama." He said it calmly. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. He was just waiting for the reunion. What do we still not know? Did Elvis have a death wish from the moment his mother died, making his entire adult life a slow-motion suicide? Was his intense grief a recognized psychological condition that, if treated, could have saved him? Or was he simply a son who loved his mother so much that he truly believed life was not worth living without her? Number 15, did a book deal the final blow? In July 1977, just 1 month before he died, a book was published. It was called Elvis: What Happened. It was written by 3 of his former bodyguards, Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler. They had been fired the year before by Elvis's father, Vernon, in a cost-cutting move. The book was a bombshell. It detailed Elvis's bizarre behavior, his volcanic temper, and most damningly, his profound and dangerous addiction to prescription drugs. It listed the drugs by name: Demerol, Dilaudid, Quaaludes, Percodan, Valium. It described his near overdoses. It painted a picture of a paranoid, sick man hiding behind the gates of Graceland. Elvis was devastated, and he was terrified. He tried to get his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, to stop its publication, offering the publisher money to kill the book. The offer was refused. According to many in his inner circle, including his last girlfriend Ginger Alden, the book sent him into a deep depression. He felt betrayed. These were men he had trusted, men he considered brothers. He couldn't understand why they would do this to him. His stepbrother, Rick Stanley, recalled Elvis holding the book and saying, This is going to kill me. He wasn't being dramatic. He saw the book as a public execution of his image. The king was being shown to the world as a weak, drug-addled mess. For a man who cared so deeply about his legacy, this was a fate worse than death. He told his doctor, George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick, that he needed to sleep to escape the shame. His drug use, already out of control, escalated in those final weeks. He was trying to numb the emotional pain. The book didn't create his problems, but it stripped away his denial. He could no longer pretend everything was okay. The world now knew his secret. The shame was unbearable. He told his cousin Billy Smith, who was with him almost to the very end, that he didn't know how he could ever face an audience again. He believed his career was over. The book confirmed his worst fears about himself and broadcast them to the world. It was a public unmasking, and he didn't have the strength to survive it. What do we still not know? Did Red and Sonny West write the book out of genuine concern, hoping it would be a wake-up call, or was it purely an act of revenge for being fired? If the book had never been published, would Elvis have found the will to get help in those final weeks? Or did the book simply accelerate an ending that was already inevitable? Number 14 was The Army, a gateway to destruction. In 1958, Elvis Presley was the biggest star in the world, and then he was drafted. He became Private Presley, serial number 53,310,761. He served a 2-year tour, mostly in Friedberg, Germany. On the surface, he was a model soldier. He did his duty. He didn't ask for special treatment. But behind the scenes, something dangerous was happening. It was in Germany that Elvis was first introduced to amphetamines. A sergeant, trying to be helpful, gave him the pills to stay alert during long maneuvers and overnight guard duties. It was common practice in the military at the time. It seemed harmless, but for Elvis, it was the start of a lifelong dependency. He discovered he liked the way the pills made him feel. They gave him energy. They suppressed his appetite. He brought the habit home with him. This wasn't the only dark development in Germany. It was also where he began to dabble in karate and a deeper, more philosophical way of thinking. He started talking about death not as an end, but as a transition. His friend Lamar Fike, who was with him in Germany, said that Elvis became obsessed with the idea of fate and destiny. He would talk late into the night about how he felt his life was on a pre-written track. He once told a fellow soldier, Charlie Hodge, "I don't think I'll ever see 40. I just have this feeling." It was a casual comment, but it was rooted in a new fatalism he developed during his time away from the spotlight. The Army took him out of his world of music and adoration and put him into a world of discipline and mortality. He saw the fragility of life, and he found a chemical way to cope with the pressure. The combination was deadly. The man who went into the Army was a rock and roller. The man who came out was a budding spiritual seeker with a new state-sanctioned pill habit. He had traded one form of danger for another. What do we still not know? How widespread was amphetamine use among soldiers in Germany, and did the U.S. Army bear any responsibility for introducing Elvis to the drugs that would fuel his later addictions? Was his fatalistic turn a genuine spiritual awakening, or the early signs of a depression that would plague him for the rest of his life? Number 13, did he try to die in Las Vegas? Las Vegas was Elvis's golden cage. Starting in 1969, he performed hundreds of sold-out shows at the International Hotel, later the Las Vegas Hilton. It was a triumphant return to live performance after years of making terrible movies. But the Vegas grind was brutal. 2 shows a night for weeks on end. It was physically and mentally exhausting. To get up for the shows, he took stimulants. To come down after the shows and sleep, he took powerful sedatives and painkillers. This dangerous cycle, the up and down game, became the rhythm of his life. His health began to deteriorate rapidly. His weight fluctuated wildly. He was often sick. On several occasions, he collapsed from what was publicly called exhaustion. In reality, they were often drug overdoses. Dr. Nick was always nearby with a shot of something to revive him, get him on stage, and keep the money machine running. During one particularly rough engagement in the mid-1970s, his then-girlfriend, Linda Thompson, found him unconscious in his hotel suite. He wasn't breathing. She and his bodyguards performed CPR and managed to revive him. It was a terrifyingly close call. But once he was conscious, Elvis was not grateful. He was angry. According to Thompson's 2016 memoir, A Little Thing Called Life, Elvis looked at her and said, "You shouldn't have done that. You should have just let me go." He seemed to view her intervention as a betrayal. He had been close to an escape, and she had pulled him back. This wasn't a cry for help, it was a statement of intent. He saw death as a release from the relentless pressure of being Elvis Presley. The stage was a place of adoration, but the hotel room was a place of deep, dark despair. In Las Vegas, the line between the two blurred until there was no difference at all. He was performing a slow suicide, 2 shows a night. What do we still not know? How many near-fatal overdoses did Elvis actually have that were successfully covered up by his entourage and the hotel management? Was there a single moment or event in Las Vegas that pushed him from a functional user to a man actively seeking oblivion? And did Colonel Parker and the hotel executives know the full extent of his health crisis and choose to ignore it for financial gain? Number 12. Why was he obsessed with the impersonal life? Elvis was a spiritual seeker. He was raised in the Assembly of God Church, and gospel music was the bedrock of his soul. But as he got older, he searched for answers in other places. He devoured books on religion, philosophy, and the occult. His longtime friend and spiritual advisor, Larry Geller, introduced him to a world of esoteric thought. Of all the books he read, one became his Bible, The Impersonal Life. It was a small, anonymous book, first published in 1914, supposedly channeled from a divine source. Its central message is that the individual self, the I, is an illusion. True peace comes from recognizing that you are part of a greater consciousness, a God self. Elvis was captivated. He gave copies of the book to everyone he knew. He read from it constantly. He carried a worn copy with him everywhere. The book's teachings profoundly shaped his view of death. He no longer saw it as an ending. He saw it as a homecoming, a shedding of the earthly shell of Elvis Presley to merge with the infinite. He would talk for hours about leaving his body and meeting God. He told Linda Thompson that he looked forward to the long sleep. He told Priscilla that death was just getting out of here. This belief system provided him comfort, but it was also profoundly dangerous. It romanticized death. It made it seem like a desirable next step, not a tragedy to be avoided. When his drug use got worse and his health failed, this philosophy gave him a justification. He wasn't killing himself, he was merely preparing for a transition. In the final years of his life, when his body was racked with pain from various ailments, glaucoma, an enlarged colon, high blood pressure, the idea of leaving that body behind became more and more appealing. He told his stepbrother Rick Stanley, "It'll be better over there. No more pain." The book that was supposed to bring him peace may have simply given him permission to let go. What do we still not know? Did Elvis's spiritual beliefs directly contribute to his lack of self-preservation, effectively providing a religious excuse for his self-destructive behavior? Was Larry Geller a positive spiritual guide? Or did he inadvertently encourage Elvis's detachment from earthly health and responsibilities? If Elvis had held more conventional beliefs about the finality of death, would he have fought harder to live? Number 11. Did he see himself in James Dean? Elvis Presley had a deep fascination with other tragic icons, especially James Dean. Dean died in a car crash in 1955 at the age of 24, on the cusp of superstardom. He was the ultimate symbol of the rebel who lived fast, died young, and left a beautiful corpse. Elvis saw a kindred spirit. He memorized Dean's lines from Rebel, "Without a cause." When he first went to Hollywood, he tried to emulate Dean's moody, intense style. But the connection was deeper than just acting. Elvis seemed to identify with the idea of a short, brilliant, legendary life. He saw the romantic appeal of burning out rather than fading away. He told friends that Dean had it right. He got out before he got old, before he got fat, before he became a parody of himself. This was a fear that haunted Elvis. He was terrified of becoming a joke. He hated the cheesy movies he was forced to make in the 1960s. He felt his artistic integrity was being destroyed. In his darker moments, he saw an early death as a way to preserve his legacy, just as it had for James Dean. In a conversation with his friend Cliff Gleaves in the late 1950s, Elvis reportedly said, "I'm gonna die young. I'll never make it to old age." When Gleaves asked him why, he said because that's what legends do. He saw his life as a movie, and he knew the script for Legends called for a tragic third act. He was acutely aware of his own myth. He understood that a premature death would cement his status as an icon forever. It would freeze him in time as the beautiful, rebellious king. It was a thought that was both terrifying and seductive. What do we still not know? How much of Elvis's live fast, die young mentality was a genuine belief, and how much was a pose he adopted as part of his public image? Did His identification with other tragic figures like James Dean and Hank Williams create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or was he simply observing a pattern in the entertainment industry and correctly predicting he would become another casualty? Number 10 was his gun collection, a cry for help. Elvis loved guns. He had a massive collection of firearms from handguns to machine guns. He often carried a loaded gun, sometimes several. He was known to shoot out television sets when a performer he didn't like, such as Robert Goulet, appeared on screen. He made his entire entourage carry guns. This obsession with firearms was part of his fantasy life. He collected police badges and desperately wanted a real federal narcotics agent badge, which he eventually got from President Richard Nixon in a bizarre 1970 meeting at the White House. He saw himself as a crime fighter, a secret agent on the side of good, but the guns were also a manifestation of his paranoia and self-destructive impulses. There are numerous accounts of him playing with loaded weapons in moments of depression or drug-fueled rage. Priscilla Presley, in her book Elvis and Me, recounts a terrifying incident where he threw a gun on the bed and told her he was tired of living. On another occasion, he flew into a rage and told his friend Jerry Schilling, "One of these days, somebody's gonna kill me." When Schilling tried to reassure him, Elvis replied, "No, you don't understand. It might be me." This was a chillingly direct admission. He understood that the greatest threat to his life was himself. The guns were not just for protection from outside threats. They were a constant, tangible reminder of the violence he felt inside. They were a tool of control, but also a symbol of the chaos that was consuming him. He was a man surrounded by weapons, fighting an internal war he knew he was losing. What do we still not know? Were there other unreported incidents where Elvis threatened his own life with a firearm? Did his obsession with law enforcement stem from a genuine desire for order, or was it a way to feel powerful and in control when his own life was spiraling out of control? Given his documented instability and drug use, why did no one in his circle ever try to remove the firearms from his possession? Number 9, what did the retirement threats really mean? Throughout the 1970s, as his health declined and his disillusionment grew, Elvis frequently threatened to retire. After a particularly bad show or during a bout of illness, he would call his father Vernon or Colonel Parker and declare, "That's it, I'm done. Cancel the tour." He would tell his friends he was going to quit, move to a mountaintop, and study religion. No more jumpsuits, no more Las Vegas, no more also Sprach Zarathustra. These threats were usually dismissed by his team as dramatic outbursts that would pass, and they always did. The next tour would be booked, the money would be too good to refuse, and Elvis would be back on the road. But the threats were more than just drama. They were a desperate cry for help. He was trapped on a treadmill he couldn't get off. Colonel Parker had him booked solid for years in advance. His extravagant spending habits and the salaries of his large entourage meant he constantly needed cash. He was the sole provider for a huge extended family and workforce. Retiring wasn't a real option. He knew it, and the colonel knew it. So when he talked about quitting, what was he really saying? He was saying he couldn't go on like this. He was saying the life of Elvis Presley, superstar, was killing him. When he told his band leader, Joe Gercio, "I'm going to be 40 soon. I can't do this forever," he was acknowledging his own physical limits. But since actual retirement was impossible, he began to see another way out. A permanent retirement. He once told bodyguard Sonny West, "There's only one way I'll ever get any peace." And you know what that is. Death was the only retirement plan the colonel couldn't veto. It was the only way to make the music stop for good. What do we still not know? Did Colonel Parker deliberately keep Elvis working at a punishing pace, knowing it was destroying his health, because he feared losing his only source of income? Was there ever a serious financial plan discussed that would have allowed Elvis to take a much-needed year or two off? Or was the entire operation so dependent on Elvis's constant touring that any break would have caused a complete collapse? Number 8. Why did he tell a backup singer goodbye? Kathy Westmoreland was one of Elvis's backup singers in the 1970s. She had a close, if sometimes turbulent, relationship with him. In her 1987 book Elvis and Kathy, she recounts a chilling conversation that took place in 1977, not long before he died. And Elvis called her to his room. He was in a somber, philosophical mood. He started talking about his life, his regrets, and his career. He told her he felt lonely and misunderstood. Then he looked at her and said he was going on a long trip and that he was going home. Westmoreland, concerned, asked him what he meant. He told her not to worry, that it was a good thing. He said he would see her again on the other side. He spoke with a sense of peace and finality. It wasn't a dramatic outburst, it was a calm farewell. He was saying goodbye. This conversation was one of many similar ones he had in his final year. He was systematically reaching out to people, trying to find closure. He seemed to be detaching himself from the world, preparing for a journey he knew he was about to take. He was tying up loose ends. He had similar conversations with his father, Vernon, telling him he was tired and ready to see his mother again. He told his Aunt Delta, who lived at Graceland, that she shouldn't be sad when he was gone, because he would be in a better place. He was not talking like a man planning his future. He was talking like a man who knew he didn't have one. What do we still not know? How many other people did Elvis have these final conversations with in his last months? Did those who heard his goodbyes believe he was speaking metaphorically, or did they understand the literal, final meaning and feel powerless to intervene? Was this period of saying farewell a sign of depression, or a sign of a man who had made a conscious decision and was now at peace with it? Number 7, was it a joke or a warning? Elvis had a dark sense of humor. He often used jokes to express his deepest fears and anxieties. One of his recurring bits in the mid-1970s was about his own death. On stage, when he was overweight and out of breath, he would sometimes flop onto the floor dramatically after a song and lie there motionless. His band and bodyguards would rush to his side, pretending to check for a pulse. After a few tense moments, he would leap up, grinning as the crowd roared. It was a piece of stagecraft, a way to poke fun at his own declining physical condition. But it was also deeply unsettling. He was play-acting his own death, night after night. Offstage, the jokes were even darker. He would often look at his bloated reflection in a mirror and say to whoever was in the room, "Look at me. I'm a fat old man. I'm gonna die soon." He would laugh, but the laughter was hollow. It was a defense mechanism. By joking about his impending death, he was trying to control the narrative to make it less scary. But he was also voicing a genuine belief. The line between the joke and the reality was blurring. Linda Thompson recalled him once looking at a newspaper photo of himself, looking particularly unhealthy, and saying, "I'm going to be a damn good-looking corpse." He thought it was funny. She was horrified. The jokes were a way of testing the waters, of saying the unsayable. He was telling everyone exactly what was happening to him, but he was couching it in humor so they wouldn't have to take it seriously. It was a confession disguised as a punchline. What do we still not know? Did any of the medical professionals who treated Elvis, like Dr. Nick, ever witness these jokes and recognize them as a classic symptom of a patient with a death wish? How did the members of his entourage truly feel when he made these jokes? Were they laughing along out of loyalty, or were they deeply disturbed but too afraid to challenge him? Number 6. What did he say on his last vacation? In March 1977, just 5 months before he died, Elvis took a vacation to Hawaii with his girlfriend Ginger Alden, his friends, and his entourage. It was supposed to be a relaxing trip. It was anything but. Elvis was in terrible health. A tour had just been cut short because he was too sick to perform, he was in pain, he was irritable, and his mood swings were extreme. During the trip, he suffered a serious eye injury playing football on the beach, which only made his condition worse. He spent much of the time holed up in his room, reading and brooding. One afternoon, he called his friend and bodyguard, Ed Parker, a prominent figure in American Kempo karate, to his room. According to Parker's later accounts, Elvis was in a strange, reflective state. He looked out at the ocean and said, "I might not come back from the next tour. I'm so tired of this." He then went on to talk about wanting to change his life, to fire the colonel, and to get healthy. But he spoke about it as if it were an impossible dream. He ended the conversation by telling Parker, "I just don't think I'm going to be around much longer." It was a moment of stark, sober clarity. Away from the bubble of Graceland and the chaos of touring, he could see the cliff he was heading towards. The vacation that was meant to heal him only seemed to confirm his own sense of doom. He saw paradise, but all he could think about was the end. What do we still not know? Did Elvis make any concrete plans or phone calls during that trip to try and change the direction of his career, or was it just talk? What was the true nature of his relationship with Ginger Alden at this point? Was it a source of comfort or another source of stress in his final months? Did the physical pain from his eye injury in Hawaii contribute to an increase in his use of painkillers when he returned home? Number 5. Did his own body send the loudest message? Sometimes the predictions weren't spoken, they were physical. By 1977, Elvis's body was a roadmap of his decline. He weighed close to 260 pounds, maybe more. His famous jumpsuits had to be constantly redesigned to hide his expanding waistline. He wore girdles and sweat-soaked towels around his midsection on stage. He suffered from a host of serious medical conditions, many of them exacerbated or caused by his prescription drug abuse. He had glaucoma, which caused painful pressure in his eyes. He had high blood pressure, at times dangerously high. He had an enlarged heart, and perhaps most seriously, he suffered from a severely impacted and enlarged colon, a painful and chronic condition. He was in constant pain, he couldn't sleep, he had trouble breathing, his body was failing him, loudly and clearly. Yet, he refused to stop. He refused to seek proper long-term medical care in a hospital setting. He relied on Dr. Nick to supply him with a pharmacy of pills to manage the symptoms, allowing him to keep performing. His physical deterioration was a living, breathing prediction of his own death. Anyone who saw him in his final months could see he was a man on the brink. His friend, musician Tony Brown, who played piano for him, said that seeing Elvis backstage was heartbreaking. He looked sick, tired, and old beyond his years. On stage, he would often forget lyrics, mumble through songs, and lean on his microphone stand for support. His body was screaming that it couldn't take any more. It was the most obvious warning of all. He didn't need to say he was dying. You could see it in his eyes. What do we still not know? What was the full, accurate list of medical diagnoses Elvis was dealing with at the end of his life? The autopsy was controversial, and some records remain sealed. Did Dr. Nicopolis fully understand the severity and interaction of all of Elvis's conditions, or was he just treating symptoms as they arose? Could modern medicine have effectively, treated his conditions, particularly his digestive issues, and potentially saved his life? Number 4, why did he talk to a casket? Elvis had a lifelong fascination with death and the rituals surrounding it. He attended the funerals of friends, family, and even strangers. He was particularly drawn to funeral homes. In the 1960s, he developed a close relationship with the Scholler family, who owned the Memphis funeral home. He would sometimes visit late at night just to talk. He was curious about the embalming process, about caskets, about every detail of the business of death. According to the book Elvis, The Final Years by Jerry Hopkins, Elvis once spent hours in the funeral home showroom looking at caskets. He sat inside one, he lay down, he commented on the lining and the hardware. He treated it not with fear, but with a kind of practical curiosity, as if he were shopping for a future purchase. He told the funeral director, Robert Scholler, "One day, you'll have me in here." It was said matter-of-factly. This was not a one-time event. His fascination continued for years. He saw death not as a morbid horror, but as a natural, inevitable process that he wanted to understand. This comfort with the artifacts of death is deeply revealing. For most people, a casket is a symbol of a terrifying end. For Elvis, it seemed to be a symbol of peace, of a final resting place. By physically placing himself inside one, he was, in a way, rehearsing for his own funeral. He was desensitizing himself to the idea of his own mortality, making it familiar. He was a man who felt so uncomfortable in his own life that he found a strange sense of peace in the place where life ends. Well, what do we still not know? Was Elvis's fascination with funeral homes part of his spiritual quest to understand the transition from life to death, or was it a symptom of a deep-seated morbid depression? Are there other stories from the funeral home staff that have never been made public? Did his close study of the funeral process influence how he wanted his own service to be conducted? Number 3, what did he tell Priscilla in their last conversation? Elvis and Priscilla Presley divorced in 1973, but they remained deeply connected. They spoke on the phone often, and he continued to rely on her for emotional support. She was one of the few people who could be truly honest with him. In the summer of 1977, she became increasingly alarmed by his behavior. During a phone call, she confronted him about the rumors of his drug use and the stories about his bizarre behavior on his last tour. According to her memoir, Elvis and Me, he didn't deny it. Instead, he sounded tired and resigned. He told her, "Scylla, I'm just sick of it all. I'm sick of being Elvis Presley." He confessed that he was unhappy and felt trapped by his own fame. He told her he was thinking about making big changes, but he sounded defeated, as if he didn't have the energy to follow through. The conversation ended with him telling her not to worry, that everything would be okay. But his tone was not reassuring. It was the sound of a man who had given up the fight. Here, Priscilla wrote that she hung up the phone with a terrible sense of foreboding. She felt that he was saying goodbye, not just for now, but for good. This was not a prediction of the future. It was a diagnosis of the present. He was telling the woman who knew him best that he had reached his limit. The weight of his own persona had become too heavy to carry. He wasn't just tired of the touring or the pressure, he was tired of the fundamental act of being himself. What do we still not know? Did Elvis give Priscilla any specific details about his health problems or his drug use during that final call that she has never revealed? Did she try to contact anyone in his inner circle, like his father or Dr. Nick, to express her concerns after the call? Was this the absolute last time they ever spoke? And what were the very last words they said to each other? Number 2, did he plan his final hours? The last day of Elvis's life, August 15 to 16, 1977, was filled with small, ominous moments. He was scheduled to fly out of Memphis that night to start another tour. He didn't want to go. He complained of being tired and sick. He played racquetball with his cousin Billy Smith around 4 a.m., a strange burst of activity in the middle of the night. He came back into the house and sat at the piano. He played and sang a few songs. One of them was Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, a melancholy country ballad about lovers parting, knowing they will never meet again on earth. His voice was weak, but full of emotion. It was the last song he ever sang. Later, in the early morning hours of August 16th, he went upstairs with Ginger Alden. He was having trouble sleeping, a chronic problem. He took his pre-packaged sleep packets of pills prepared by Dr. Nick's staff. When they didn't work, he called his aunt to bring him more. At some point, he told Ginger he was going to the bathroom to read. He took a book with him, The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus. It was a book about the Shroud of Turin, a subject that fascinated him. His last words to Ginger were, "I'm going to the bathroom to read." He also said, "Okay, I won't," after she told him not to fall asleep in there. It was a mundane end to a legendary life, but was it? He was a man who knew his body was failing. He knew he had a heart condition and severe digestive problems. He knew the massive doses of sedatives he was taking were dangerous. Taking that final dose and then sitting alone in a position that could put strain on his heart and bowels was a profoundly risky act. It wasn't an act of suicide, but it was a passive one. It was the act of a man who was done fighting. He put himself in a vulnerable situation, flooded his body with drugs, and let fate take its course. What do we still not know? What was the exact combination and dosage of drugs Elvis took in his final 24 hours? The toxicology report was extensive, but has been the subject of debate for decades. Was there a final straw, argument, or event that day that pushed him over the edge? Did he say anything to his cousin Billy Smith on the racquetball court that hinted at his final intentions? Number 1, what was the last promise he couldn't keep? Just hours before he died, on the morning of August 16th, Elvis had one last crucial conversation. He was with his 9-year-old daughter, Lisa Marie. She was the light of his life, the one person he loved without complication. He hugged her goodnight, knowing he was leaving for tour later. She would be staying at Graceland. According to multiple accounts, including those of the staff at Graceland, he told her, "I'll see you in a couple of weeks, baby. Don't you worry." But there was another, more poignant exchange. He was talking to Ginger Alden about their future. Despite the turmoil, they were unofficially engaged. He was rambling, talking about wedding plans, about, starting over, about, getting healthy. He told her, "We're going to have a great life. I'm really going to get serious about changing things." He had said this before. It was a familiar promise. He was always going to fire the colonel. He was always going to stop the drugs. He was always going to lose the weight. Tomorrow, after the next tour, next year. But this time, it felt different. He was talking about the future while his body was actively shutting down. He was making promises he had to know he couldn't keep. This wasn't a prediction of his death. It was the opposite. It was a desperate, last-minute prediction of a life he wanted but could no longer reach. It was the final, tragic fantasy of a man who could have anything he wanted except for a normal life and a healthy body. He was telling his fiancée and his daughter that he would live, while every action he took, every pill he swallowed, was a vote for the other side. This is perhaps the most heartbreaking prediction of all, the one where he pretended, one last time, that there was a way out. He knew there wasn't. What do we still not know? Did Elvis truly believe in those final moments that he could change? Or was he just saying what Ginger and Lisa Marie needed to hear? What was the true state of his relationship with Ginger Alden? Was it a genuine love affair or a final desperate attempt to find the stability he'd lost with Priscilla? If he had survived that night, what are the chances he would have actually followed through on his promises to get clean and change his life? Or the next tour have simply been a repeat of all the others?